Hi all, and welcome to this month's edition of the Esri Law Enforcement Webinar Series, Deploying New Law Enforcement Solutions with ArcGIS Pro. My name is John Beck, and I'm joined by Chris Delaney, and today we will be giving you an overview of ArcGIS Pro. We're going to start by highlighting some of the new capabilities you get in Pro, and then Chris is going to show us a demo of Pro, including the Solution Deployment tool, which makes it possible to browse a catalog of ArcGIS solutions and then deploy fully configured layers, maps and apps into your web GIS in only a few clicks. He will then show us an example of how this is done using our newest law enforcement solution for tactical operations planning. If you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to type them in the chat window and we'll either answer them as we go at the end of the session, or if we run out of time, we'll follow up with you via email. So let's start by talking about what is ArcGIS Pro and some of the differences between ArcGIS Pro and the old Arcmap. So there's been a lot of confusion around Arcmap, ArcGIS Pro, and the difference between the two. Don't worry, Arcmap isn't going away, but as of now it's included as part of ArcGIS Desktop along with Pro. So moving forward, when you get a desktop license, you're actually getting Arcmap and ArcGIS Pro. Arcmap is going to continue to be supported, but Pro will be the focus of all of our new desktop feature functionality and development in the future. With each ArcGIS desktop license, you also get access to one level 2 named user ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise Portal account and 100 service credits. This also gives you access to all of our web and mobile apps and online content and services. So you might be asking yourself, why do I care about Pro and these changes to ArcGIS Desktop? First of all, Pro is going to be faster and easier to use. It's 64-bit, so it performs better, can handle big data. The new user interface is a Windows-style ribbon, so if you're familiar with any of the Office products, you'll be familiar with this style of ribbon. It contains most of the commonly used Arcmap functions will now all be on the top in the ribbon, organized into tabs for functions such as analysis, view, and sharing. And don't worry, you can easily migrate all of your old MXCs over and organize them into Pro project folders so that you aren't losing any of your old data or projects, and they can all be accessed in the ribbon. For the more complex and specialized functions, they will all be organized into views and panes that can be opened as needed. A view is a window that represents the primary work area of the application. For example, a view could be a map, a 3D scene, a table, a chart, or any other visualization of your data. You can also have multiple views open at the same time, but only one of them will be active at any time. And to work with the active view, use commands on the ribbon or in a pane. A pane is a dockable window that contains commands and settings that are not available on the ribbon. Common panes include the table of contents pane, which will list all of your map contents. The project pane, which is an inventory of all the items in your project and commands to manage them. And the geoprocessing pane, which will be a place to find and run all of your geoprocessing tools from. Pro also integrates 2D and 3D in one single environment, including the ability to tilt up your 2D map and view spatial relationships in a 3D scene, making data more understandable. So working in 3D, you can do things like visualize data and time on a 3D axis, create 3D hotspots, and conduct line of sight analysis with 3D feature and surface data. It's also now easier to work with web maps. In Pro, you can add data from ArcGIS Online and consume services from Portal. You can also publish services directly from Pro, and there are now many options for sharing your work. You can create project templates, layers, maps, scenes, layouts, and tasks, and publish all of these into either your entire organization or groups that you decide to share them with based on your administrative rights, or you can share them to the public if it's a public crime map or something of that sort. Options for sharing include packages, projects, maps, layers, and tools. We've also added Arcade. Arcade is a new expression language for ArcGIS that is usable across all devices and apps. Arcade can be used to improve certain aspects of the platform like symbology. In the first release, Arcade is focused heavily on allowing users to do more when styling layers, but what this will ultimately mean is that by using Arcade, you'll be able to provide additional logic for labeling and symbology to create even better maps to showcase all of your work and your data. Finally, with Pro, you can create tasks. So think of a task as a macro for ArcGIS. If you ever use a macro in Excel or Office, any of the Office products, you know that it records tasks and then you can reuse them later on. So in ArcGIS, a task will be a set of pre-configured steps that guide you and others through a workflow or business process. A task can be used to implement a best practice workflow. It can improve the efficiency of a workflow, or it can create a series of interactive tutorial steps that you can share with others. Okay, enough of me talking. Now let's turn it over to Chris, who's going to show you how easy it is to do everything that I just described. Hi, Chris.
Hi, John. Hello, everybody. Thanks for being with us today. So as John mentioned, I'm going to walk you through a number of those key features that we've identified and then show you how the new solution deployment tools can help you utilize ArcGIS Pro to more effectively leverage the ArcGIS solution sets that are available, those layers, maps, and apps that John referenced, and deploy those into your ArcGIS Online organizational portal or your ArcGIS Enterprise portal. And then we'll take a look at the newest solution we've just released called Tactical Operations Plans that support a variety of tactical operational scenarios in law enforcement. The first thing that I'd like to do before we start talking about ArcGIS Pro is just briefly review the overall hardware requirements for ArcGIS Pro to run on your desktop computer. And there's a couple that are important because they do change from what you're used to with Arcmap. First, ArcGIS Pro is a 64-bit application. So if you're running an older desktop computer that is not a 64-bit computer, you're not going to be able to run ArcGIS Pro. Secondly, you do need to have a decent amount of RAM in your computer. There's a minimum requirement of 4 gigs of RAM to run ArcGIS Pro. 8 gigs, and obviously the more the better, especially when if you're doing more high-level 3D rendering and things of that nature. But if you can get 8 gigs, that's our recommendation, but it can run effectively on 4 gigs. Okay, so let's take a look first at the logging in process for ArcGIS Pro. If you're not familiar with ArcGIS Pro is licensed in 2 ways. The primary way in which ArcGIS Pro is licensed is via the named user model that exists in either ArcGIS Online or in ArcGIS Enterprise, where each individual user has a unique identity within your mapping portal, and that unique identity is provisioned a license via the portal to ArcGIS Pro. And you can see here my login screen. I'm able to log into ArcGIS Pro with my username and password. However, if you do not have an organizational portal, ArcGIS Pro also supports standard licensing, single-use licensing structures with a standard license file that you're used to working with in Arcmap. But the preferred mechanism is the named user model, mostly because it provides a seamless experience for you working with layers and services and maps that already exist in your organizational portal. And that's a key value of ArcGIS Pro, is that seamless experience between data services and maps in your portal and the desktop environment. So I've now logged onto ArcGIS Pro, and I'm going to start a new project. And as John mentioned before, one of the nice features of projects in ArcGIS Pro is that the projects themselves are organized in a very clean way. I'm going to save a new project to my desktop. I'm just going to call it April Webinar. And when you create a new project in ArcGIS Pro, it is not only storing inside of a project folder the actual project file itself, but then also a default geodatabase and a default toolbox. So it makes it much easier to package and organize your products, as opposed to previously working with Arcmap. You might have an MXD and it's referencing data that's all over the place in one single You may have one single default geodatabase, but then when you go to move that MXD, you didn't properly reinforce the links, or it's hard to share. This makes it much easier to organize and share that information. So this is ArcGIS Pro, and the very first thing that I'm going to do in ArcGIS Pro is move over to my insert ribbon. As you can see, the look and feel of these ribbons are very consistent with the Windows Office ribbon-based structure. And the core idea here with these ribbons is to make it easier to surface tools directly to you and to provide contextualized surfacing of tools relative to the task that you're performing. And in this way, what you are getting is you're not having to dig so deeply through right-click menus to find the particular capability that you want. It's contextually surfaced for you. So the first thing I'm going to do here is in the Insert ribbon, I'm going to go to New Map, and I'm going to select a new map, and adding a new map to my layer. Now, as I start to work in ArcGIS Pro, I just want to take a step back for a minute and look at a existing Arcmap project. For many of you, you're used to working in a standard Arcmap structure, and in this case, since I am from previously Rochester, New York Police Department, I like to use a lot of Rochester data as an example. I have a map of the last 60 days of Part 1 crime in Rochester, and I also I have a layer of police beats, and as you can see in the my table of contents of Arcmap, I have two data frames. The first is a data frame of Part 1 crimes, and if I needed to make a hard copy map, I could select the layout, and I would be able to see the associated layout for that particular data frame. And then if I wanted to be able to have a bunch of different slices and dices of certain type of crime types, I might have them in different data frames in my Arcmap project. In this case, I have a data frame that just has my burglary data. And again, I would be able to make a layout from this particular data frame, and that's how data generally gets organized in Arcmap. It's not you can't really have different data frames grouped side by side or have multiple different layouts of one data frame. You're really limited in how you can create multiple layouts for a data frame or be able to visualize multiple maps on the same main screen of the MXD project in Arcmap. You don't have that problem in ArcGIS Pro, and that's one of the big benefits of ArcGIS Pro is the ability to have much more flexibility with map views and with layouts. And if you haven't worked with ArcGIS Pro before, one of the best ways to get familiar with it is to take an existing Arcmap MXD project that you already use and just bring it right into ArcGIS Pro. And so that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to bring in that Arcmap project that I just showed you by going to the Insert Ribbon tab, and I'm going to go to the Import Map tool and navigate to my desktop where I see a webinar example MXD, and I'll bring that right into Arcmap. And so in this way, I don't have to start to understand everything about how I navigate to data in ArcGIS Pro. I can just have a map that I'm already comfortable and familiar with working with available for me in ArcGIS Pro. So now I can see my map that I was working with in Arcmap is loaded in ArcGIS Pro, and I'm ready to start doing some work. And so maybe in this particular instance, I might like to kind of copy what we had in the previous project where I had a different view just of burglaries. And so to do that, the first thing I could do is, if you see up here on the top of my map view, I have different tabs, and these represent the different data frames that I have to work with. I can take this layers frame, which is the imported MXD, and I can drag it into the middle of the map viewing area, and then I can dock it to the right-hand side, and now I can see two map views next to one another. I can then also take this crime data that I have and just make a copy of it and then go to the next map view and paste it into that map view, where here I can subsequently start to do some additional filtering work. And so in this case, I might be interested in going to just filtering out for burglaries. So I can right-click, just like in Arcmap, and go to Properties. And just like in Arcmap, select a definition query, where in that definition query, I would just filter out for burglaries. So now I have the ability to view multiple maps side by side, and I can start to work with them how I like. But as John mentioned, one of the new, very compelling components of ArcGIS Pro is a new expression system that we call Arcade. If you were previously used to working with, in some cases, depending on the nature of the query, you were working with SQL, or you were working with VB, or you were working with Python. Arcade really now it aligns both labeling expressions and symbology expressions to make a single experience for ArcGIS Pro users and for users in a WebGIS environment. So the expressions that you write are accessible not only in the desktop environment, but they are equally applicable into web apps and other apps in the ArcGIS ecosystem. So let's take a quick look at what that looks like. Let's say I want to take this burglary data that I have here on the left-hand side, and I want to symbolize it by, let's say, day of the week. And I don't really have a day of the week value in my data set. So what I can do is use Arcade to write a simple expression that renders day of the week off of my date time field. So even though I don't have a unique day of the week field in my data set, it can be calculated on the fly using Arcade and displayed for symbology purposes. So how would I do that? Well, I can simply select if I go to the weekday function, the weekday Arcade function, I can select weekday and then select my field that contains my reported crime timestamp. I can check my expression, and then when I press OK, I'm going to get back a new symbology that reflects the day of the week. And the coded values here run from 0 to 6, where Sunday equals 0. So if you're used to working with something like Microsoft Excel, where the day of the week goes from 1 to 7, this is the same idea, but in this case it just goes from 0 to 6. So this is a very convenient way in which you can use expressions to style your data in very complex ways. And also, as you get more, you're able to become more complicated in your use of Arcade, you can do things like create averages or percent change using a symbology expression without having to have a unique field calculated to make that work, which can save you quite a bit of time in geoprocessing on the backside of activities. And that expression carries into WebGIS cleanly as well, so you can really use it anywhere. So that's just a little bit about how Arcade works in the ArcGIS platform. If you're interested in learning more about Arcade and some of the functions that are available, check out developers.arcgis.com/arcade, and that's kind of our main landing page that provides information about understanding the language and various functions that you can apply in Arcade. So the next thing I want to talk about is in the same way that you can have multiple map views in an Arcmap project, you can also have multiple layers. And so if I was interested in creating some maps of my Part 1 crime layer, my Part 1 crime layer that I have here, and let's say one of the maps that I'm interested in is zooming into downtown and creating a map of downtown. I can simply, by staying in the Insert ribbon, I can go to the New Layout tool, create a new layout, and that will then open up a new layout from of any map layer view that I choose. So this starts to become pretty interesting because now I can have multiple different layouts for different aspects of a map frame. So I'm going to select my my layers map view as the map frame of choice for this layout. and then I can utilize the tools here in my map frame to navigate my way to whatever view of this map that I'm interested in. So if I want to have another layout, I can have another layout, and instead of having that layout be focused on downtown, I can have it be focused on another part of the city. So typically we might try to apply this kind of approach using data-driven frames, but if you're not really interested in taking that kind of approach and you just want to have some kind of fixed layouts, you are able to do that exact same type of approach using the layout structure, where you can kind of have multiple layouts for a particular map frame and make it very easy for you to work with. So here, maybe I'm making a map of the 287 beat, whereas this other layout is a map of the 219 beat. It's much more easier to control a variety of different layouts that you would like to apply to a common set of layers in a map view that you want to work with. So that's just a little bit about multiple layout options and multiple map view options. The next thing that I'd like to show you a little bit is the ability to take data that is in ArcGIS Pro and to create 3D scenes using that data. So first thing I just want to do is I want to change my symbology back in my 60-day burglary to, I'm just going to select a single symbol for my 60 days of burglaries, and I am going to now create, using the insert ribbon again, go to the new map button, but hit the drop down and then see it select a new scene. This will create a new 3D scene inside of my ArcGIS Pro project, and now I can take either bring in data, which if I needed to bring data from a different source, I could go to the map ribbon and use add data, or I'd have the ability to go to one of my other map views and copy that map view. In this case, I want to grab my burglary data, and then I can paste it into this scene. Now, ArcGIS Pro by default knows whether you're working with data that is already 3D enabled or if it's not already 3D enabled. And in this particular case, as I brought this data into this scene, ArcGIS Pro knows that this data is not 3D enabled. And for general crime data, when you've got some crime data that you want to extrude into 3D, what you have to do is take that date data and you have to turn it into a numeric value that you can then extrude as a z-value. And so I want to walk you through how you go about doing that. So to do that, I'm going to go into my attribute table, and I'm going to take a look at the date data that I have to work with. And in what you want to do to extrude crime data by date in 3D is you want to convert a date time value. In this case, I have occurred from and to dates, or I have a reported date timestamp, and I want to convert that to a numeric value, a day of the year value that goes from 1 to X, that indicates what day of the year that particular crime occurred on. As you can see, I've already added one in here, but I want to just stop briefly and talk about how you go about doing that. To calculate a value like this is actually pretty simple. All I've done is add in a new field to my data set, and then I've right-clicked on that new field and pressed the Calculate Field tool. And this is going to be using a little Python function that you need to create in order to make that calculation. And I want to show you what that calculation string is, because if you're used to in Arcmap using things like VBScript to do calculations on date, where you use something like datepart, a function of that nature, this kind of replaces that functionality. So many analysts have to do all sorts of modifications to date time fields, and this is the new way to do that. So before I show you in ArcGIS Pro, I just want to kind of show you briefly what the string is, and we'll send this information out for you in the future. But to take any date time field and to transform it into some other time aggregation, month, year, day of the week, hour of the day, you use this particular function string, arcpy.time.parseDateTimeString, and then you put in your particular field with exclamation points on either side, and then dot strf time, and then the function component of that last function, the percentage, and then the particular letter is the particular time grouping that you want your data to be calculated as. And I've got a list of all of them right here on the right side of this PowerPoint slide. So you've got a variety of options: day of the month, weekdays, in a variety of form, month, hour. So it's a little clunky trying to learning this particular string, but once you learn the string and the different options that you have available to you, it ends up being quite a bit easier than maybe what you're previously used to using in Arcmap. And if you need this chart that you see on the right-hand side, that chart is available at strftime.org. So let me hop back into ArcGIS Pro now, and I could take that exact same string. In this case, if I wanted to calculate that day of the week field, I just put that in here, and then I can run my tool to get a numeric field that represents day of the year. So now, once I have that field, I can take this data in my 3D view and extrude it using Z-value. To do that, I right-click on my layer. Oh, the first thing I have to do is I have to drag this layer into my 3D layers group. And now I can take this and I can go to Properties, and I can go to Elevation. And what I'm going to do here is select features are at an absolute height. So the number that I have in a particular field, which is my day of the year field, is equivalent to the height I want to render them at, extrude them at. And then I also, to make them a little bit more visual, I'm going to exaggerate that a little bit. So I'm going to exaggerate this by I'm going to add a vertical exaggeration of 50 feet, and then a cartographic offset of 10 feet off of the ground, so all of the points are visible. So now all of that data has been extruded by the day of the year on which the crime occurred, and when I press down on my mouse scroller, I can now start to move my map to a 3D view, and I'm able to see my points in 3D, where the lowest points would be the earliest points in my data series. This one's from February 10th, and the highest points are from the most recent series. So this can be a very useful and fairly simple way to start to visualize some of the kind of temporal aspects of hotspots or things of that nature that you might have. So that's a little bit on 3D activity in ArcGIS Pro. It's a really exciting new capability inside ArcGIS Pro that previously you had to go out to something like ArcScene to perform. It's very smooth and easy to use. And as I mentioned before, one of the other really nice components of ArcGIS Pro is how integrated it is to the rest of your WebGIS deployment, whether that's to your ArcGIS Online organization or to ArcGIS Enterprise. If I go over here to the project pane on the right-hand side of my project, I can click the portal option, and I have the ability to see all of the WebGIS content that belongs to me, groups that I belong to. I can search my entire organizational portal, or I can search ArcGIS Online and some of the living atlas online layers and services that are made available by Esri and bring them directly into my project. So if I needed to do things like bring in a real-time weather or traffic feeds that are publicly available, it's very easy to grab them or search for them and bring them right into my project in real time. Once you've got a map the way that you like, then you have the ability to share it. You can share it into hard copy, into complete files. So if you need to share a file with someone of your entire ArcGIS Pro project, you need to package all the data up, you can do that. You can package individual maps up or individual layers. But the real powerful piece of this is then to be able to export data that you have into web layers in your organizational portal or as entire web maps. So it's very easy to do. If I was interested in taking this last 60-day layer and publishing it as a web layer, I can do that. I can add in tags, describe the layer, control sharing, and publish that immediately up into my ArcGIS organization so it's available for everyone to use. Now, the last component of ArcGIS Pro that I really wanted to draw your attention to is a new capability that John mentioned called tasks. And I'm very excited about tasks and their prospect for law enforcement analysts because tasks really represent a way in which analysts can build unique geoprocessing and analytical workflows and help someone else learn how to perform that exact same workflow. So a task is really nothing more than a combination of certain functions and geoprocessing tools in ArcGIS Pro combined with descriptive information about what you need to do for each of those tools and ordered so that the tools occur in sequence, including capabilities like the ability to have certain parameters automatically populated or to have kind of one output filter to the next task, et cetera, et cetera. So if you are working in an analyst shop where you've got a lot of turnover or you're a new analyst, being able to share tasks that other more experienced analysts have created can be a really powerful way to get up to speed quickly. So let's take a look at tasks and how they work in ArcGIS Pro. So to go to the tasks window, you need to go to the view ribbon and then select the task button. And any task that you have available will then show up in that task window. I have built for the purposes of this exercise a new task that I want to show you, and I'll bring it into this project by going to the Insert ribbon, and I'm going to insert a task by importing it and opening it up. So these are complete. It's a complete file, so you can share these. You could email a task to someone else, and then they could download it and bring it into their ArcGIS Pro project. In this particular task, I've tried to tackle a process that often is kind of challenging for analysts, and that is running a kernel density to generate a hotspot, but then turning it into polygons so that you could count the number of crimes that occurred in a hotspot or slice out those crimes in that hotspot to save them for evaluation purposes, to do additional analysis on them. I've taken all of those steps that you might perform from a geoprocessing perspective, and I've combined them into one single task. So let's walk through that task and see what we get. And we'll perform this on the burglary data. So I'm going to start the task, and I can see quickly that in this task we have 6 steps. And the first is going to be to run a kernel density. I'm going to run this kernel density on my burglary data in this map view. I am going to select a cell output size of 50 and then a search radius of a quarter mile or 1,320 square feet. If you're not used to using the kernel density tool, remember that the search radius that you enter has to be equivalent to the unit of measurement of your projection system. So in this case, I'm using New York State plane, and so it's in square feet. So I want to make sure that my search radius is an appropriate square footage as well. And then my output area units I'll have set to square miles, so the output is a reasonably high number that can be easily interpretable. So I'll run this tool, and as you can see here, I've got some guidance on the tool as it runs, telling me what I should be doing, and then some guidance on what particular inputs I need to be populating. So in this way, you can add on top of the baseline kernel density tool some guidance for analysts on how they're supposed to use the tool. And now you can see if I tab back to my contents window that I now have my kernel densities. So I can zoom in a little bit more so I can see these better. Now if I go back to my tasks, I can then move on to the next step in my task sequence. And the next step is to create some contour lines. This is where I'm cutting the raster analysis output of my kernel density into vector lines based on the desired classification of my kernel density that I'm interested in. So if I look at my classification schema here for my kernel density, let's say I might be interested in looking at only the hotspots that had a classification of a density of 30 crimes per square mile, 30 burglaries per square mile or higher. So to just select out those, I'm going to take my input raster that I just calculated, and I'm going to create a base contour of 30. So I'm not interested in anything lower than that 30 interval. And then I want, inside that interval, I want everything. So the max value of my hotspots is 104 crimes per square mile. So I'm going to put this at 105. And again, that's a little kind of confusing. So if it's a new analyst, they don't really understand what this stuff means. You can add into your task descriptive information that helps guide someone through running the task. And that's really one of the key value components of building tasks to make it so easy. So I run this and then I can see that I now have a line layer that highlights the particular areas of my hotspot as a vector line file as opposed to a raster. Now the next step in my task is to convert those lines to polygons. So I'm going to use a convert line to polygon tool. I'm just selecting the output of my previous step and going to run this tool very quickly, and then it's converting those lines into polygons that I can then use to count crimes and to slice my, my crimes in those areas by. I can then move on to my next step, which is counting the crimes that are occurring inside of those hotspots. So I want to take my input polygons that I've just created and my 60-day crime layer, and I'm going to run this tool again, and it's going to create a new output for me. And that new output is then going to have the counts of crime information that are inside each of these hotspots. So it's run that tool. Now if I look in here, I can look at this hotspot and see we had 3 crimes in that hotspot. Or if I come over here, I can see that we have 3 crimes in that hotspot. 2 crimes in that hotspot. So very quickly and easily I've gone from nothing to running a kernel density to turning it into the polygonized version of that kernel density to counting the crimes inside of it, and then just lastly to selecting the crimes that are inside of those hotspots and exporting them out as a new unique layer so that I have the ability to run those if I need to do additional analysis on them or I need to put them into a bulletin, something of that nature. And then, so there's my entire layer of burglaries. I can see that the ones in the hotspots have now been selected, and then in the last step, I simply have the ability to export those as burglaries as a new layer. I'll just call them Bergs in hotspot. And that's going to then create a new layer for me of just those crimes in those hotspots. So I hope in running through this task, you get a sense of the value of tasks generally for crime analysis workflows. And we intend to grow a library of tasks that can support crime analysis workflows, and we hope that you take a look at tasks as well as you start to adopt ArcGIS Pro and start to consider tasks and workflows that you might be interested in creating in a task and sharing those with the broader community of analysts so that we're able to leverage each other's work in more effective ways. So So that's an overview of tasks. The next thing I want to talk about is a new tool that we have just created using ArcGIS Pro, which I think you'll find to be another key value of ArcGIS Pro, and that is something that we're calling the solution deployment tool. And the solution deployment tool is an add-in for ArcGIS Pro. It's actually really a task, and it enables you to, via ArcGIS Pro, access a catalog, as John mentioned, of all of the solutions that have been built by Esri's solution team for law enforcement, for local government, for defense, and download them and deploy them right into your ArcGIS portal, either on ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. If you're not familiar with our solutions site, I really encourage you to check it out. It's at solutions.arcgis.com. We do have specific law enforcement solutions. They're under the local government heading. So if you scroll down to the local government and you select law enforcement, you can see all of the solutions that we have created for law enforcement, and we'll continue to evolve these over time. Our newest one is around development of tactical plans. So I'm going to show you now how you can use our new solutions deployment tool to deploy this new set of apps. And so it's really a set of 3 apps that are related to tactical operations plans. And to do that, I'm going to use this solutions deployment tool. When you go to the solutions deployment tool site, which is here in the URL, and we'll send out that link for you at the end of the webinar, and you download it, you get a zip file, and that zip file gives you a little add-in. So you should see you should download a zip file like this, and when you open it up, you'll see a little add-in that you can double-click, and that will enable you to add in this new tool into ArcGIS Pro. And from there, let's go back to ArcGIS Pro. When you look for the solution deployment add-in, you'll see it under the Share ribbon in ArcGIS Pro. So if you go to the Share ribbon, you'll see at the very end of the Share ribbon a button called ArcGIS Solutions. I can click on this, and I can see that it opens up a task in my task window. So this tool is really nothing more than a task, and it takes you through a few steps. If you're not already signed into an ArcGIS Online organization or your portal, it prompts you to do that. I'm going to skip ahead to just simply deploying an ArcGIS solution. So when I click on the Deploy an ArcGIS Solution task, it's going to give me the complete library of all solutions that are available from Esri for all industries. If I click on the local government drop-down, I'll see all of the local government ones that are available to me. And if I scroll down here, I can see the Tactical Operation Dashboard, Tactical Operations Planner, and Tactical Operations Surveillance apps. These are our newest apps that we've created for law enforcement. I also see a checkbox here that indicates I've already deployed this solution to my portal. So since I already have these deployed, just for example purposes, I'm going to deploy one of our older solutions so I can show you some of the capabilities. What I want to do is deploy the Field Interview Web Map, which is an existing solution that we have on our solution site. To do that, I simply select that particular solution, and then I press the Deploy button. And it will subsequently publish a new layer, a new web map, and all of the styling associated with that web map into your organizational portal. If it's an app, like a dashboard or some other kind of web app configuration, it will publish the entire configuration of the dashboard as well. So this saves you a ton of time having to build your own app configurations or dashboards when you can leverage an out-of-the-box template, bring it right into your organizational portal, and then tweak it from there. And that's really one of the exciting parts of this solution tool, is it gives you some capabilities to tweak any solution that you download and install into your portal from the tool itself. So it's completed its deployment of the Field Interview tool. If I go into my portal, this is the home page for my organizational portal, and I go into my content, and I'm going to sort my content by the most recent. I can see that I have now a field interview layer and I have a field interview web map that have been deployed from the Solutions Deployment tool in ArcGIS Pro. So if I just, I can see here that I have the field interview web map and the field interview layer. So I didn't even have to do really hardly anything, and I already have that stuff ready for me. So if I go back into ArcGIS Pro now, I go into the next step of this, this tasks sequence, which is to configure this solution. In order to configure this solution, I first need to bring that field interview layer into my Arcmap or my ArcGIS Pro project. So I'm just going to go to my content, and I'm going to search for field interview, and I can see that new layer that I've just had imported into my ArcGIS online organization. And now if I look in my contents, I can see I have this in my map as well. I'm going to turn off some of this other stuff so it's we don't have to look at it. And right now I don't have any values in it, so there's nothing to see on the map really, but I do have this in my map. So if I go to tasks, I can now start to further configure that field interview layer. So maybe I want to add some new fields to this field interview layer. To do that, I select the field interview layer, and then I can add in new fields. So maybe I want to have a gang-related field, and it's going to be a text field, and I'm going to give it an alias. And that's going to populate a new field for me inside of that field interview template. So if our baseline schema for a layer that you download using our solutions tool doesn't really fit your needs, you've got the ability to add in new fields as well. So that's a really cool feature. And additionally, if you want to be able to modify the existing domains in any field, you can do that as well. So for example, if I went into the field interview layer, I could see all of the fields, and then I could see domains that already exist in that field. So if I go to, let's see, race, for example, I can see the existing domain types in that race, and if I'm in that race field, and if I need to change them, I can do that. I can modify that domain on the fly, so you can adjust any of the individual field values to fit the unique needs of your organization. Additionally, if it's a particular solution where you might want to map existing data that you have into that data schema, there's a tool that helps you do that. So this solution deployment tool really becomes a very easy way to leverage ArcGIS Pro to quickly deploy new capabilities into your organization. And now let's take a look at the newest solution that we've created, that if you have an ArcGIS Online organization or an ArcGIS Enterprise portal, you can get ArcGIS Pro, download this tool today, and get these new solutions into your organization immediately. So our newest tool, our newest solution, we call Tactical Operations Plans. And Tactical Operations Plans is really a suite of 3 apps. It is first a web app, so that incident commanders or supervisors responsible for any number of tactical operations. So could be missing person searches, just a crime scene perimeter, it could be a barricaded gunman, a suicidal person, an active shooter scenario, where you need to quickly sketch up an operational plan that involves tactical units, it involves perimeters, it involves maybe door-to-door house checking, it involves routes and zones. You have all of the layers already ready, pre-configured, ready to roll, and that incident commander can quickly sketch up an operational plan using this Tactical Operation Planner web app. Then for people who need to be able to visualize those plans, we have a Tactical Operation Dashboard that can be accessed either in a desktop or in a browser. That Tactical Operation Dashboard will show you all of the active tactical operations in that jurisdiction at any given time. So if a number of incident commanders have used this web application, the Tactical Operation Planner web application, to build a bunch of different tactical operation plans, you can see them all in this dashboard, and you can get information about the number of resources that have been assigned to that operation. As part of the planning process, we also have a web map that supports the collection of surveillance or the collection of doing field data collection. So this is a web map that can be utilized in Collector for ArcGIS with an iPad or an iPhone or Android device to be able to go conduct surveillance, so capture a picture or video and share that into the operational plan and the dashboard, or to go do door-to-door location checks and be able to share that information into both the planning app and the dashboard app. So let's take a look at what those look like. So the very first one of these is called Tactical Operations Planner. It's a very simple web app with a very simple set of functionality. If you'll notice over on the left-hand side, you've got some basic map navigation capabilities, and then you only have 5 key tools in this web app. The first is an editing tool. So it gives me the ability to edit a number of pre-configured layers that I have in this app. So if I want to continue to build an operation plan, in this case, I have a standoff from a barricaded gunman at a rec center, and I'm going through the process of building this operation plan. I can cycle through the different layers that I have. So I might go to my tactical units, and I want to place a police vehicle. I can place the location of that vehicle. I can add in comments, so maybe a particular officer or something that they've been tasked with. If there's attachments that are relevant that I need them to see, I can add that in, and I could just save that and go back. And so in this way, I can quickly start to put together a operational plan. I don't have to have a lot of GIS experience, so this is something that an incident commander or non-technical GIS person can leverage and take advantage of. I also have the ability to print my operational plan. So I can print it as a PDF, so it can be shared with folks who don't have internet access. If there's data from your ArcGIS Online org or ArcGIS Enterprise portal, you can pull that in and search for it and bring it right into your map to incorporate it into your larger view. This is particularly useful if you want to do things like bring in real-time traffic conditions into your operational plan. You can do that. If you need to toggle between a standard topographic base map and imagery, you've got the ability to do that. And if you want to be able to turn on or off some of the layers in your particular plan, you're able to do that as well. Once an operational plan has been created and ready to use, it's then available for people to access in the Tactical Operation Dashboard. So this is the Tactical Operation Dashboard. You've got the ability to kind of see a legend of all of the points associated with an operation, and I can see all of the current operations that are currently active. When I click on that operation, it zooms the map to that location. So I can see that there's a suicidal person. I can zoom to that one as well. I can see that we've got an overall perimeter and a standoff area, and I've got a potential jumper off of a large building. And I can see that there's been some notes that have been written by the investigative commander. And if I needed to swap out to see a base map because I wanted to see, he mentions that he's near the swimming pool on the 15th floor of the building. I can see that swimming pool right there, and I can see where the command post and the negotiator are currently active. I can see some information about the overall operation. I can see the number of units deployed in a breakdown by type of unit. And if I were doing some kind of location checking, I also have a couple of widgets that help me see the number of location checks that have been done and the status of those checks. Now going back to the first example of a barricaded gunman, let's say I had in the process of preparing the operation, we performed some surveillance. And we needed to capture some information about that surveillance. Using a mobile device, an iPad or an iPhone, and the Tactical Operations Surveillance map solution, I could go into Collector for ArcGIS and open that up on my mobile device and access the Tactical Operations Surveillance map. And I could see here's exactly where that surveillance officer is. I can see where I am. And then I have some simple options on what I want to capture, whether I'm doing location checks or I want to capture some surveillance. So I'll just grab the surveillance icon and I'm going to select a location I want to capture, and maybe there's a potential entry window that I'm interested in potentially trying to capture. I can simply select that, use that photo, and submit that information, and then that information is available to both the operational planner in the operation planner map and inside of the dashboard as well. So you can see it pop up right there, and I've got access to that information, and I can see the photo in real time showing up. So I'm able to have seamless communication between field officers, either doing surveillance or doing location checks, and the operational command for the incident. So I hope that was an interesting look at our new Tactical Operation Plan solution, as well as ArcGIS Pro and our new solution deployment tool. I really strongly encourage you to download and start to use ArcGIS Pro as well as this solution deployment tool in some of our new solutions. This is going to be a workflow that we continue to emphasize over time as we build new solutions, so that to make it easier for you to deploy quickly new capabilities into your web GIS portal, whether it's in the cloud or on-premise. So resources, how do you get started? If you want to take a quick screenshot, you can. Otherwise, we'll send this stuff to you. The first thing is ArcGIS Pro. You can, if you don't have ArcGIS Pro already, you can download it from our licensing site, my.esri.com. If you don't have access to that site, either contact your GIS administrator, or if you don't have one, you don't know who would have access to that in your organization, contact our customer service and they can help you walk through that. So service@esri.com. As I mentioned before, by default, ArcGIS Pro does use named user licensing. If that doesn't work for you in your organization for some reason, in My Esri, you can select the type of license that you want ArcGIS to be provisioned to, whether it's a standard license file or named user license. And those named user files are provisioned inside of your organizational portal by the administrator of your portal. If you don't have any of that stuff and you just want to be able to play around with ArcGIS Pro, you can download a free trial from this URL. Go to the solution site to download the solution deployment tool. It does require ArcGIS Pro. You can't use it with Arcmap. It's a very quick install, very easy to use. And then you can download and try those tactical operation plan solutions that I just showed you. If you don't have any of this stuff, but you still want to mess around with those apps, you can go to this URL, our solutions site, and you can do a try it live on both the dashboard and the planner tool. If you want to show it to a supervisor, for example, you don't have these capabilities, but you want to get them, you can use that try it live capability to show and to play with these apps. And then just lastly, since ArcGIS Pro is new for a lot of people, it's going to take some time to get familiar with it. But one of the new features of an on-maintenance ArcGIS desktop license is you get unlimited access to our library of web courses for free. So it's part of what you get with an on-maintenance desktop license. And that includes all sorts of classes on ArcGIS Pro, little 4-hour classes to get you up to speed. So you can, without having to go attend a class or make a huge time commitment to learning ArcGIS Pro, you can leverage some of these web courses and get yourself up to speed fairly quickly. So I know we're probably getting a little close to the end of the session, but we'll try to take just a couple minutes to do some questions. John, are there some questions that came in that we can answer?
Yeah, we got a lot of questions. We only have time for a couple of them, so I'll just pick a couple here. Does ArcPro need any extensions to run 3D?
No, it doesn't need any extensions to run 3D. It does 3D out of the box. You are going to get the same extensions that you paid for in Arcmap in ArcGIS Pro. So if you paid for Spatial Analyst in Arcmap, you're already getting Spatial Analyst in ArcPro.
Thank you. For building the time cubes, is there going to be the ability to use other types of shapes like the hexagon tessellation?
Yes, hexagon is actually already supported in the time cubes. So that was in the last 6 months, I think. So if you go take a second look at building space-time cubes and visualizing them, you do have now the option to not just use square cells. You've got hexagons available for you already.
We have a lot more questions. Sorry we didn't have time to get to them all. We'll follow up with you after the webinar. We'll reach out directly to each of you. If you want to contact Chris or I directly, here's our contact information. Chris, can you skip forward to that?
Oh yeah, just one other thing before we hang up, John.
Yeah.
If you liked what you saw on the webinar, please consider taking a look at the rest of our webinar series. You can see what's coming up next at www.esri.com/PS webinar. We do webinars not just for law enforcement, but for EM, for national security, for CAD 911 dispatch, and fire as well. Our next webinar for law enforcement will be in June, and we'll have some information coming up pretty soon on what the topic of that webinar will be.
And all of our webinars are recorded and will in our archive there, including this one, which will probably be up in a week or a week and a half.
Yep, this is the Public Safety Webinar Series page. If you scroll down, you can see the upcoming webinars, and then you can see past webinars for each industry in public safety, including all of the past law enforcement webinars. So if you don't get a chance to check out a webinar because you're busy, but you want to review it, they're all available here on this site.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you in June on our next webinar, and there'll be more to come about that soon. Thank you very much. Have a good day.